am Lucy.
I'm Laye.
Today we are discussing one of the most urgent overlooked global challenges, that is women's access to decent work and real economic opportunities. In the sub-Saharan and Central and Southern Asia, nearly 9 out of 10 workers are women and they work in the informal employment. So today we have one of our women who works in Africa, an entrepreneur who is creating opportunities for women in Senegal. She's the founder of KaNora Services. Welcome, Mame Awa Mbaye. Could you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Thank you, Lucy. Hi, Lai. It's so good to connect with you both. So indeed, I'm Mame Awa Mbaye out of Senegal. I like to call myself a nomad. So if I just start with the personal introduction, I always say that I am an immigrant who didn't have a choice in her immigration, right? So at 2 years, my parents were already leaving Senegal to go to Côte d'Ivoire for a search of a better life. And then we moved back to Senegal and eventually ended up in the US, in New Jersey, which is where I was raised. And I did my grammar schools, middle school, high school, and eventually university degree before eventually moving to Belgium. And in moving to Belgium, that's because I got married and followed my husband to Belgium. He got an opportunity there. So I followed him. Now, after nearly 30 years of immigration, I used to come to Senegal on vacation all the time growing up. But in 2018, there was just something tugging in my heart. I've always dreamed of moving back, but I never had the courage. Something shifted in me during my last vacation to Senegal. So in 2018, I came and then I went back to Belgium. I said, no, I'm moving back. I'm moving back because, when we come on vacation, we usually stay in the capital city or we go to the nice resort areas. But then we complain a lot about the state of the country. But we move when we go back to our comfort. So in 2018, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, okay, but what are you doing about it, Mame Awa? What are you concretely doing about it? Besides just maybe sending a couple of dollars or euros here and there to family members on the continent, how are you supporting the change in a sustainable manner? So I decided to move back and I applied to the United Nations, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, which is the specialized fund for the UN, supporting smallholder farmers, right, across the world. Lucky for me, I was recruited and based out of Senegal, but covering West and Central Africa. Before that, I was in the financial markets, right, in Europe. So it's a complete shift from what I was doing in Europe. But then I moved back then in 2018. I decided that August 2018. By December 2018, I was back on the continent. So just the power of manifestation, saying this is what I want and this is what I'm going to do. And I'm a big believer in Allah's will. And he made it happen, right? Of course, with a lot of applications and trials on my end as well. After being in the UN for about 4 years, I sat with myself again. I do a lot of introspection, like, okay, how am I contributing to all of this? What can I do even more? I moved to the MasterCard Foundation, where I was leading our work in terms of access to finance and entrepreneurship development across the 8 YMU countries. I did that for 2 years. While I was doing that, so growing up, I'll come back a bit. Growing up, my dream was to move back to the continent, and my dream was to work for the UN, to work in international development and all of these things. When I moved back to Senegal, my mother-in-law connected me with a young lady who was my children's nanny. Her name is Sally. So during my time at the MasterCard Foundation, I had a conversation with Sally because she was with us from 2018. So I'm telling her, Sally, the children are growing up. Tell me about your dream. When you grow up in the States, everybody's dreaming about the American dream, even though probably 1% of Americans reach it, but at least they have that opportunity to dream of a better life. So I go, Sally, tell me about your dream and how can I support you in achieving that dream? And she looks at me and goes, I do not have any. And that broke me. And even when I recount that conversation now, it's still very hard for me because to know that I'm on such a beautiful continent and we have such amazing young women here who are supporting us in reaching our dreams, and yet they don't allow themselves to dream. So that's how I decided to launch a social enterprise called KaNora Services. So KaNora Services now is working to transform the domestic workers, to not only support these young ladies to dream, but to connect them to economic opportunities to where eventually they're able to achieve those dreams. So I'll just stop there and hand it back over to you guys.
I would like to ask, you have become a very important person now, not instantly dream, but a lot of other young lady. How can you manage it day and day? For example, is big responsibility or is okay something that you manage it?
From my understanding of your question is how am I managing it on a day-to-day basis? Do I understand the question correctly?
Yes.
Correctly, yes. So I'm proud to say that Sally now has a dream. Her next dream is to become the CEO of KaNora, right? So I'm currently leading KaNora. That's Sally's dream. So I look forward to the day where I hand over to her. But at this time, we are now at nearly 200 young ladies that are onboarded. So we officially launched mid 2025. We are currently at nearly 200 young ladies who we have trained in place and continue supporting. And we have a pipeline of over 300 young women who are waiting to join us. And this year in 2026, our goal is to reach 5,000 of them across Senegal. So it's not easy to manage, right? Because I've always worked in international organizations, even when I lived abroad. And moving back to the continent as well, I was in the UN, I was in the MasterCard Foundation, so really big, mature, solid organizations. So launching a social enterprise is not for the faint of heart, if I may say so, because it requires a lot of resilience. It requires a lot of resilience, and it requires a lot of understanding of the field and the understanding of the realities of these young women and the complexities that they face and the challenges that they face. Because ultimately what we're trying to do and what we have done so far is build an ecosystem around her to support her. And when I talk about ecosystem, now we have insurance, health insurer that provides them with health insurance benefits. We an international organization that provides them with complementary retirement benefits because this target group normally they don't even know what the word retirement means, right? Retirement benefits, pension, they don't know any of those things because they work in an informal sector. By formalizing them now through KaNora, we're able to provide them that. But most importantly, before we place them, we train them. A lot of this target group, most of them never went to school. So they never went to school. So what we've done is now we've built partnerships also with vocational schools recognized by the government. So those vocational schools, together we have designed a training program whereby we train them and then we place them. So indeed, to come back to your question, like doing this on a day-to-day basis requires a lot of intentionality, a lot of humility, because a lot of the things that you think you know, you don't really know. And sometimes a young lady will speak to you or share about a situation because it's situations that even surpass the imagination, right? For me, that's what I always say. Their realities just even go beyond my wildest imagination. And those are the things that allow us to continue building the ecosystem around each of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Awa. From your story, the dream of Awa, or creating that dream of Awa, was where KaNora was conceived. And that dream is now being replicated to many other women in Senegal. I am curious to know, especially now that you built your career in the European finance system, and then you went into the UN development work, what skills and practical issues that you experience in this European finance system and the development work helped you in building or in properly setting up KaNora?
I think that's an excellent question that I've never been asked before. I think what it ultimately allowed me to build as a skill, I'll start with my career in finance. So I was a credit risk officer for an international central securities depository. My role was to provide credit risk assessments for international financial institutions, right? And there, what it allowed me to learn is risk management. How do I effectively manage risk so that I don't jeopardize what the institution was building? So risk management. And the second thing that it allowed me to build is critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills. And the third thing is humility. I say humility because the markets is something that you don't control, but you have to stay on top of the markets and you have to stay alert, right? Because if you're managing a portfolio of credit that this financial institution, which is a market infrastructure essentially for Central Europe, for Western Europe, is you need to stay alert and you need to stay on top of things. So for me, that's what it taught me. When it comes to my career in international development and in philanthropy, what it taught me is, first of all, I say my experience at the UN, at IFAD, was very valuable in teaching me Africa. You know, when you're not raised on the continent, you think you know the continent. You think you know the continent. For me, working at IFAD and really going to our different countries, but when we go to our different countries, we don't stay in the capital cities. For example, I remember traveling to Chad and driving 6 hours to Mongo. When you go to Benin, it's the same thing. You drive far away from Cotonou. So it teaches you really the essence of Africa and the truth of Africa and the realities of this continent. So I think what that did was it taught me the continent, one. And it taught me program management, how to design something that is meaningful for the people that you are supporting. Because I can come and just think and just see them from afar and think I know what they're going through, and then just design something based on my perception without really understanding their realities. Coming back to what I was saying earlier around the fact that even though you have all of the intentionality in the world, even though you design to the best of your abilities, their realities still surpasses the imagination. So it means it's a continuous learning experience and continuous adjustment of what you're building, and especially agility, right? And how do we continuously incorporate our learnings to make sure that we're getting things right? And I'll just end here and say, for me, one of the things that have always been important for me is I'm not in a ticking box mindset. My goal is not just to tick boxes and say we did this, but my goal is what is the impact that I'm having? And ultimately, what is the impact that KaNora is having on these young ladies? And recently we've done a survey, right, just to understand how KaNora is impacting them. And when you hear 90% of them tell you that my quality of life has improved since I've joined KaNora, I think for me, it shows that we are doing something right. Yes, there's room for improvement because we are at 90, we are not 100%. What is happening with those other 10% that we need to resolve for? But I think the majority of these young women are like, yes, a resounding yes. My quality of life is much better since I have joined KaNora, and it's something that we're really proud of here.
I just wonder, how do you recruit them? You know, it is a system that you can recruit them, or how can you recruit them?
Indeed. So when we first started, because we wanted to test the idea first, we were recruiting from our network. I think essentially all of us know a young lady who is looking for domestic work, or we know somebody who knows somebody who's looking for domestic work. So it was through recommendation, right, from our network, because we wanted to have a sample size of 10 that we would start with. So we tested the model from November 2023 and eventually only launched officially in May of 2025. But we tested with the small group of 10 from our network. But now that we are scaling, we recruit them from still from our network, but also online from social media. We recruit them from social media, but we have a very rigorous due diligence process because we're placing people in homes, in the homes of our clients. So we need to make sure that whoever we're placing in Laye's home, in Lucy's home, we're comfortable enough with them to place them in my own home. For me, that's the threshold. Am I comfortable with this person in my own home? Yes, if I am, then I can place them in Laye's home, or I can place them in Lucy's home. So we asked them for various types of documentation to prove, first of all, who they are, to know where they live, and to understand their background and their experience and all of these different things. We do a very rigorous interview and due diligence process before we onboard them. And then we train them. We do all of the capacity building training in terms of hard skilling, right, through our vocational school partners before we place them, so that we make sure there's a minimum of competencies that this young lady has before we place them. But we don't place you and leave you. What we do is we place you, but we keep you because we stay the middleman. So Laye, as a client, would sign the contract with KaNora, and the young lady, the KaNora lady, will sign a contract with KaNora. Because what we do is we continue soft skilling her. We realize that one of the main challenges is soft skills. It's not necessarily technical skills, because I think all of us grew up learning how to cook, grew up learning how to clean, grew up learning how to take care of our younger siblings. So even though we do that training in the beginning, one of the main challenges is soft skilling. How do you manage client relationships? How do you manage your resources in terms of financial education? How do we build your leadership skills? And the last thing that we do is mentoring and coaching, because a lot of them, when you speak to them, unfortunately, to come back to Sally's dream, is that because there's no hope. There's no hope because society has told them that this was a dead-end job. Being a domestic worker is less than. Being a domestic worker is a dead-end job. So we do the coaching and the mentorship to deconstruct a bit all of these messages that society has told them, to let them know that the sky is the limit. Yes, this is where you are now, but it doesn't have to determine where you're going in the future.
Okay, let's talk finances. I'm sure when you started up, you looked at the finances and how to access them. But for many young people who want to start any kind of business in Africa, finance is a major impediment. Based on your background in finance, when many young people hear about access to finance, we think about loans. That's what comes to our mind. What other thing should young people or anyone who is a potential entrepreneur out there think about before the money even enters in the picture? When you think about finance or financing a business, what should an entrepreneur or young people think about before that money comes in their account?
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. And it reminds me of when I was at the foundation. You know, my title was Access to Finance Lead, right, for entrepreneurs. So every time somebody met me, their first instinct was, how do I get money? I need money for my business. Where do I get access to finance, etc. But as an entrepreneur, for an entity or an investor to invest in you, there's a minimum. There's a minimum to have, right? In terms of structure, in terms of reporting, in terms of processes, in terms of systems to have, right? So, and I think that takes time to build. It takes time and intention to build, because as an entrepreneur, especially on the continent, you spend your days fighting fires. But in parallel, you need to also spend your days building structure so that you can attract investors. And when we talk about investors, you know, access to finance and the different type of financial instruments, it's many of them. So you have grants, you have equity, you have loans. I think a lot of people are really familiar maybe with debt, which is loan, which most people go to in the beginning. And it's something that I don't recommend when you're first starting out your business journey, because when you take a loan, there are interest rates, right? Is your business, and when you take a loan, then you make a commitment to reimburse a certain amount at the end of the month. When you're first starting out, you're not making money. You are not really making much money. So why would you take a loan that will force you to commit to reimbursing a certain amount every month? And on top of that, you're going to have to be paying the interest on top of that loan. So it's resources that you don't necessarily have. So for me, when you're first starting, I think there are so many programs on the continent supporting entrepreneurs and providing them with grants. So you target those programs based on the type of enterprise that you are launching and based on the impact also that you want to have. But before you target them, make sure that there's something to finance also. And make sure that when the resources come in, they are used the way they are supposed to be used. Because, again, unfortunately, there are some entrepreneurs that receive the resources, but because in terms of financial management, it's a challenge for them. The resources ended up being used for other purposes other than that which they've raised the money for. And what that ultimately does is it creates challenges for them to raise more funds, and it's not worth it. But for me to come back to KaNora, I launched it on my own resources, right? Because I wanted to make sure that it was a viable business before bringing anybody else in. So I needed to take the risk on my own money, my own nickel and dime, to make sure that, okay, what I'm building is solid. And now I can feel comfortable in going out there and taking somebody else's money. So basically, raising money for me requires intentionality and understanding yourself and what you are trying to build and how these resources will help you continue building ultimately as an entrepreneur.
That means you have to know how to manage the money.
Absolutely. For me, that's criteria number one.
Yeah, because we see a lot of examples, a lot of people give money to someone, let us work together, but at the end of the day, they don't get anything out of their investment. So that
Absolutely.
make people worry about the continent. So if I can ask you, for African in the diaspora, you yourself was there, but a lot of other people living in the US, maybe they may be African American, they have never been into the continent, and then they have another picture of the continent. So if they, for example, coming from US or from Europe, if they want to come to Africa, for example, what type of thing they have to think over it, reality to be discussed, and the same question goes also to African that our brothers and sisters that live in Africa. If they want to come to Europe or to America like that, what type of skill, what type of thinking, what type of preparation they need to do before coming? Because you are like a library here now, so you have been to all these three areas. Through talking to you, a lot of people will get knowledge.
No, thank you for that question. I think it requires the capacity to adapt. I think when we dream of coming back to the continent as Africans, we have a certain mindset, right? A certain way of thinking. That's how things should go. Until we get on the continent and we're like, ooh, okay, so there's a bit of a disconnect between my expectations and the realities on the ground. And it was my case as well. And I remember a year into moving back, my husband looked at me and was like, what is happening to you? You just seem upset with everything that is happening. I said, yeah, I'm just so frustrated. I don't understand why things are not X, Y, Z. And then I had to be like, but you are not in Europe anymore. You are not in America anymore. You need to adjust to your environment. And you need to accept that this is the continent's reality. Because we know so many people who move back to Africa and they stay a year or two and they go back to wherever they came from, whether it's the US or Europe, right? Because they're having a difficult time adjusting to what the continent is. I think for me, once you do that shift in terms of your mindset, you're good. I'm at a point where now, whenever I travel, sometimes I even change my flight to come back to the continent earlier. Right? I'm at the point where it's like, okay, I need Senegal. Because I've accepted what Senegal offers. And I think once you do that, it frees you to take full advantage of what is going on. And it's the same advice that I will give also to the people going abroad, is the capacity to adapt to your reality. And when I talk about adapting, it doesn't necessarily mean forgetting who you are, forgetting your roots, because I'm very I'm very pro, understanding your roots, understanding who you are, and really being an ambassador, being an ambassador of your people, right? But it requires adapting also to the realities abroad. One thing I would encourage young people to do, young Africans, and that's why I was saying earlier, I didn't really have a choice in my immigration, is if you do have a choice in your immigration, come back home early. Go study, go get the experience, but come back to the continent, because the continent, I don't even like the saying Africa is the future. Africa is the now. All of the opportunities in the world are on this continent. It's the now. So how do you fully take advantage of all of those opportunities being abroad? You can't. And a lot of those opportunities, you need to be here to seize them. So for me, those are my two things: the capacity to adapt. And if you're going abroad, go abroad, get your degree, get your experience, but please come back ASAP so that you don't miss the opportunities that this beautiful continent has to offer.
So, you mentioned that when you started KaNora, you waited for a bit, I think about 2 or 3 years before you formally launched it last
Exactly. 2 years, yes.
Yes, I see that most young entrepreneurs like you, when they start, they're small startups, and most of these startups, unfortunately, you find that when you come back to look onto them 1 year later, they are gone. Like they are not a running concern anymore. So, what habits separate this small startup, small business to survive from year 1, 2, 3, and ensure that they are going concern? Like, what are those habits you've seen in KaNora and also in your development work, which makes businesses, small businesses and startups viable?
That's an excellent question. You know, right before this call, I was reading an article that was talking about how 60% of
Yeah.
SMEs die after 1 year. And I think it comes back to your point, Lucy. And I think one of the reasons is maybe we are not solving for the right problems, right? And the second reason is we want to go too fast. For me, I took those 2 years to test the idea, to adapt it, to build it in a way that I was comfortable, that I first understood the problem and that I was solving for the right thing and that I had the right solution before launching officially. So I think it's that pilot phase, it's that testing of the idea phase, unfortunately, and the business planning that we don't have. And the third thing is also financial management. Financial management is key. It's key. You know, you cannot start today, have the big corner office, and have the big 4x4. It just doesn't work that way, right? Even when you're born, what do you first do? You learn how to sit, and then you learn how to crawl, you learn how to stand, and then you walk, and then you run.
Run, yes.
And exactly. So for us, I think as entrepreneurs, I have an entrepreneurship coach who tells me entrepreneurship is the most humbling experience in the world. Because it is. You have really highs, and then you have really lows. Because
Yeah.
you've worked so hard on something and it doesn't go the way you expected it to go, right?
Yeah.
So brings me to my final point, which is resiliency and capacity to learn and adjust. Don't say, oh, I thought of this, it has to be this way. No. If it doesn't work, the market doesn't want it, figure out a way to, you know,
Adjust.
exactly, adjust and move on and move on. At least you've learned something in the process.
Yeah.
I have a question related to domestic worker and the violence. You know, we see a lot of video, especially in Asian country, Arab country, a lot of violence be doing against African ladies that found themselves working as a domestic worker. So what can you say about that in general? And then what precautions are you taking as you sending young lady to domestic work? So do you train them if something happened, so they will take contact with you or to the police, to be protective? Have you? I know you have think about it, but we would love to hear from you.
No, that's an excellent question, and it's a topic that breaks my heart, right? Because when somebody is taking care of your most precious thing, which is your home, your children, the food that you eat, you should treat them with respect and kindness. So what we do here is to make sure that we empower them to advocate for themselves. That's our first level of training that we do. That's what I was talking about earlier about the leadership building skills, the communication skills, right? The awareness raising and the deconstructing of the messages that they have in their head about them not being good enough or not deserving enough of amazing things. Second thing we have done is we've put in place a mentorship process where each mentor has a group of young ladies that she supports, right? So she's in contact continuously with those young ladies, understanding what they're living in the households and they feedback. And Sally, the reason why all of this exists is now the coordinator of all of the KaNora ladies. So her only role is to oversee the well-being of the KaNora ladies. You see, so we have a lot of different channels whereby The young lady in the household can raise her hand and say, listen, this client is not values aligned to KaNora. I no longer want to work with her. And we've had cases like that where the client, one KaNora lady, for example, 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation with one. She's like, no, the client, I do not appreciate the way that she speaks to me. I no longer feel comfortable being in this house. And we've changed her immediately. We changed her immediately. Our first resort are the contracts. You know, in our contracts, that's where we usually set the standards with the clients. We say, this is how we expect you to treat the KaNora lady. This is the number of hours we expect her to work. We try to kind of frame the relationship. But we all know how contracts are respected on this continent, right? Especially, I'll speak for Senegal, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't read. So the option is empowering those young ladies so that they can advocate for themselves and so that they can speak up. And for me, I refuse to send a young lady across country lines. I've had those requests where somebody's like, I'm moving to this country. Can I take a KaNora lady with me? She's been with me for a while. She's amazing. I don't want to move a different country and change. I say no. Unfortunately, no. She can only work in Senegal for KaNora because how do I protect her when she's abroad? I can't. By the time I take a plane and go all the way somewhere else, something has happened. And it would be quite unfortunate and something that I don't think that I can live with.
Let's talk about the young ladies that you have empowered that are building their dreams. As I understand, you already have a mentorship program. What money habits are you ingraining in these young women who now are starting to have some sort of stable income and some job stability and satisfaction? What money habits are you inculcating to them, which any other young entrepreneur out here in the continent can replicate wherever they are?
Indeed. So here the first thing is saving. That's one thing. I'm trying to see how many have told us that they save now. They save more since joining KaNora in the survey. Yes. So the question is, do you find that you're able to better manage your money since you've joined KaNora? And 56% say yes. So the majority say yes. They're now able to better manage their finances because we have a partner who specializes in financial education. So that partner comes and then we have 2.5-hour sessions around how you manage your money and how we deconstruct the notion of working paycheck to paycheck. Right? And now they're earning a decent living compared to what they were earning before. So now the majority, for example, I'm trying to look at 70% earn more now that since they've been with KaNora than before. Because now they're able to earn more, they can save a little bit, right? And they can breathe a little bit more. So that's the first thing. That's what we do, savings. We really encourage savings. The second thing that we encourage is not to how can I say it? To not have the need to prove anything to anybody, right? You don't need to prove to Laye or prove to Lucy that you're a big baller or that you got it, by making useless expenses, right? So it's one thing that we're kind of deconstructing with them as well. And the third and last thing is the notion of paying yourself first. Because these young ladies, I believe it's over 70% of them. They support what is it?
Families.
Yeah, it's 59%. So 60% of them support also their families. Right? So how do you have a weight of a family on you and yet be able to save and think about your future? Right?
What
So
does it entail to pay yourself?
So paying yourself means, what do I need first? I worked so hard for this money. How do I not just take it at the end of the month and then just give it to everybody and struggle for the rest of the month, right? So then you save. You save first for yourself, for your future, and for your children. Now, whatever money is left over, you live, of course, you pay your bills because otherwise things won't be okay. You need to pay your bills and then you support your family.
Yeah.
You see, but at least you've taken care of yourself first, and it keeps you less frustrated. it makes you less frustrated about the fact that you're working so hard and you don't see where your money is going. Because that was one of their main complaints when they first joined KaNora. They're like, I work so hard. I've been working for 10, 15, 20 years. And I can't tell you what I have realized with the money that I've earned.
So essentially, they're the first priority.
Exactly. That's it.
I
That's it.
think a lot of people would love to hear the formulas for paying yourself.
Uh, no, you have to pay yourself first.
I have another question. The age gap, those who work in for KaNora, how old can they be? It's between 18 to some between 30, or how old can they
No, indeed, we don't have a maximum age, but what we find is that we don't have, I believe we have one or two people that are above 50. You know, household chores are taxing on the body. This
Yes.
job is not easy. What we find is that a lot of them transition out of this sector in their early 40s, early to late 40s, they're done. They can't do it anymore. And us, because of that understanding, we've put in place the complementary retirement benefits, which our partner, Sanlam Alliance, these young ladies contribute on a monthly basis, right? So Sanlam takes those resources and fructifies it on in the financial markets. So it grows in essence. So that way, when you say, okay, KaNora, I am retiring, you can pull back that investment and go and become a saleswoman. You can use it to invest in a small business. And that supports your transition out of this sector. Because otherwise, what usually happens right now is that once they decide to retire, they don't have anything else to fall back on. And for us, that was something that we needed to solve for. And that's why we put in place the complementary retirement benefits. And the second thing that we put in place is that the best mentors will get supported in opening their own domestic agencies, domestic services agencies, because we're becoming this year an aggregator of domestic service agencies through our platform, our digital platform. So the best mentors now will be supported through launching their own domestic services agencies and becoming business women themselves. And most of them don't come from Dakar. So we have one the other day, for example, the KaNora Lady of the month of January was telling me, I'm from Kaulak. My Kaulak is about 300 kilometers from Dakar. You maybe and
Yes.
Laye as well. Yeah, and then she's like, I'm from Dakar. My biggest pride in KaNora would be within the next 5 years to have my own agency in Kaulak so that I can also start recruiting other young women around me. Yeah.
that is inspirational, that you don't just give them an opportunity to work, but also opportunity to innovate the same process they have been learning through you. So that is very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, as we wind up, what is that one advice you can give to the young people in the continent who are wishing to start up something, service, business, or anything which is running on low capital? What advice could you give them to ensure that at least their business survives?
Yes, yes, yes. I think for the business to survive, there are so many different factors at play, but you can give yourself more of a chance, right? Not to be part of those 60% of businesses that disappear within the first year. It's first of all is financial rigor. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. It's really how are you managing the little bit of resources that you have and allocating them to in the most efficient way, right? For me, that's number one. Number two is you cannot be tired as a business person. As an entrepreneur on this continent, especially, you cannot be. I cannot tell you the number of people who have said to me this week, try to go on vacation, try to get a break, try to rest, try to right? Because they see the pace that I work at.
Yeah.
But for me, that is necessary. It's an investment that I'm making in KaNora because I'm building something that is much bigger than myself. You see, the almost 200 young ladies that we've onboarded now depend on this. Their families, it's usually about 7 to 10 persons per household. They depend on this. So we have over 2,000 people that are now dependent on the success of KaNora right now. So this is much bigger than myself, right? So think about what you're building in the grand scheme of things. Don't just think of yourself as somebody who is selling or transacting, goods and services. And the third point that I would say to them is be patient. When you're building something that is worth it, it takes time. It takes time. And the last thing is be willing to learn. Be willing to learn and surround yourself with smart people who will tell you what to do. Smart people who will tell you what to do, because you don't know it all. You definitely do not. None of us do. And we all need help. So surround yourself with smart people who will tell you what to do. You are not a leader to tell others what to do. And for me, I think when that is your mindset, unfortunately, everybody stays quiet and just lets you continue until you hit the wall. Bring along your team with you and give them voice and agency and let them tell you what to do as a leader.
Yeah, I was just thinking about as they get one question, we see the technology have changing the world, and how can African youth compete in the world of technology? And those who, we see a lot of people who making video to get something out of it, but those who want to use technology to make a business like you're doing now, what type of advice can you give to them?
For me, technology is an enabler. You see, we're in the domestic services business, but we anchored by a platform. We have a platform where the customer goes in, recruits a KaNora lady, where the KaNora lady can go in and see her monthly pay stub. We do everything through the platform. And in addition to that, we talk about AI lately. We are building a tool which should be launched in a week or two, which will help us in recruiting going forward. Because a lot of our target group, they can't read or write, and we need to interview them. So we can just send them a document telling them to complete the document. Where it's a tool that's going to be built in local language in Wolof through WhatsApp, where she would just press and speak to the tool and do her interview that way, her first interview. So I say that to say to the young person on the continent is that you cannot afford not to use technology in your business, because it's an accelerator, it's an enabler, and it's essential if you want to scale. If you want to go outside of your neighborhood or your village or your country, it's important that you lean on technology, and you need to build your skills. And even I see it in recruiting young people in terms of the challenges in using IT, right? Because of course, a laptop is expensive. So not everybody can afford one. Not all schools have access to computers. So oftentimes by the time they have access to computers, laptops, etc., it's university. So I think beyond even the young person is, as a continent, how are we rethinking access to these tools for the young people? Because it's necessary if we want to remain competitive as a continent. How are we rethinking it? How are our leadership, those in charge of our education, how are we making sure every young person on this continent has access to a laptop, to a computer? How are we making sure that every young person has the opportunity to improve their digital skills? It is important that we are not left behind as a continent.
Thank you so much, Awa, for gracing our show. And I hope that the young people out there in the continent who are listening to us have gained a lot from your insight, and they will be able to have that courage to set up something to support themselves and their families, and also to help buttress our continent as it goes forward economically. Thank you so much. I don't know if you have a final word for our viewers.
Just thank you for having me. I'm very grateful for the invitation, Laye&Lucy. I think this is an amazing, amazing initiative. Please continue. Please continue. Give voice to every African. I know that may not be possible, but at least try, because it's a really, 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 really nice opportunity that you are offering us to share. If you have an idea, please do it. I just say jump. Life's too short.
Yes.
If you're thinking of doing something, please do it. That's it. For me, that's my only final word. Jump. You're thinking of something, don't overthink it. Bet on yourself. Give yourself a chance. At least if it doesn't succeed, you would have learned something and you would have grown from it. Jump. That's my final word.
So, our viewers, thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed our discussion with Awa, please like our video, leave a comment, and share it with others who will benefit from all the knowledge she has shared today.